Our brand new documentary is finished and we're ready to show the world. I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and you're watching The Gun Show.
In a vast land of untamed beauty, hidden within its borders lie stories of unwavering faith and resilience. When the world was engulfed in fear,
COVID-19, which is causing all of the concern right now,
pastors faced an unimaginable trial. They were wrongfully persecuted during the COVID-19 pandemic, their voices silenced by oppressive measures.
And we realized something doesn't match up.
There's an agenda under the surface here.
I cannot obey under their wishes. I cannot just obey this new norm, if you will.
In the face of adversity, they held on to their beliefs, defending the sacred right to worship.
Out of this property, you Nazis! Out!
Join us on an extraordinary voyage across Canada as we shine a light on the untold stories of these pastors who were wrongfully persecuted during COVID-19. Witness their courage, their unwavering faith, and their determination to reclaim their voices in the face of adversity.
I'm not going to let those who are in Ottawa determine my peace, my joy.
You're disobedient to the government or disobedient to God, and take your pick.
This summer, embark on an unforgettable exploration through Church Under Fire, Canada's War on Christianity, a documentary that will inspire and challenge your perceptions. Experience their remarkable stories, a testament to the indomitable human spirit and the power of faith.
That's the trailer for our brand new documentary, Church Under Fire, Canada's War on Christianity. You can get details and showtimes at savethechristians.com. But I wanted to have my filmmaking partner on that project, our head of documentaries, Kian Simone, on the show with me today to talk about, the finishing touches that we've put on the documentary and how we're trying our best to bring it to a town near you. So joining me now in an interview, we just finished recording, is my friend and colleague and documentary partner, Kian Simone. Take a listen.
This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
Adam Sos here for Rebel News. Our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
So joining me now is my friend and colleague, chief documentary filmmaker here at Rebel News, and my frequent travel partner, Kian Simone, to discuss the finishing touches he's put on our brand new documentary and the launch. So we're taking it on the road, and we want everybody out there to join us. Kian, thanks for coming on the show. You recently wrapped up our documentary. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, for people who are just finding out about the documentary, and I don't know how you could just be finding out about the documentary, but let's go back a step and tell people about our brand new documentary.
Well, thank you for having me on, first off. Second, so we just wrapped up Church Under Fire, Canada's War on Christianity, which is about, I'd like to say it's about the persecution Christians faced during COVID-19. From congregations to the pastors to just the church itself. But really it's like a 8-year come back to how it started and how it evolved and what it looked like and what it looked like during COVID. And we really touch on almost everything we can.
Yeah.
Everything we could fit into an hour and a half.
that was the thing, is like, how do you fit a decade long creeping attack on Christian churches? How do you fit that into 90 minutes? But I think we did a pretty good job. And part of, I think, the documentary was pointing out that this didn't just happen in a bubble or in a vacuum, that it started sort of when Justin Trudeau took power. And it was all these little picky things at, fringing on people's religious freedoms to get to where we are, chaining up churches and throwing pastors in jail. It didn't just happen overnight. It was a slow burn that I think a lot of Canadians didn't pay attention to. Yeah, when I was editing our intro, and we kind of touch on, when you touch on exactly that, I was looking for some China B-roll. B-roll, for what people don't know, is just kind of the footage you put over top of someone else talking. And I saw these news clips from like 20 years, not even 20 years, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, of police shutting down churches. And you hear the Chinese translator saying, church is not essential, and your church is now closed. Like, you cannot go to church anymore because X, Y, and Z. And it was like the exact same wording that the politicians in Canada used. And that was like, I mean, I was already kind of, what do the kids say now, red-pilled about the whole thing. But just hearing that again while being at like the end of the step of the documentary, I was like, oh, wow, this is real. Yeah, and that's what it was like for me too, because just before COVID lockdowns hit the churches, because COVID never actually hit the churches, COVID lockdowns hit the churches. Just before then, in late 2019, I had just come back from northern Iraq. And for me, that sort of weaponized my heart against persecution of not just Christians, but the religious, people of faith, because I had seen the end stages of a genocide. And again, it didn't just get there. It started with these little nitpicky rules where you all, after, a decade or so, you end up with ISIS using your church steeple as a sniper's nest. That doesn't just happen overnight. But for me, or in Ottawa as a weed store, or as what we saw. Well, yeah, we recently just got back from Ottawa, and we're like, "Is that a church? No, that's a weed store." But and for me too, like the faith of the Christians to not just survive the genocide in northern Iraq, but insist on remaining, to not buckle, to know that there will be the next genocide and the next genocide and the next genocide, because there always is there. But they won't leave. They must stay. That sort of hardened my heart, and left me with a certain, I don't want to say disgust, but maybe that is the right word, disdain for Christians here, who we got it pretty good here. And so many churches were scared of Teresa Tam or Dina Hinshaw or Jason Kenney or Bonnie Henry. And I had just come freshly back from people who had survived ISIS. And the Christians here were scared of Dina Hinshaw. And I tried not to have that bleed into the documentary, but it might have just a little bit. Well, I mean, it has to, right? Like you said in the documentary, and like you just said before, that it is that slow burn. It's that, what's that other analogy? It's the frog in the hot water. Yeah, it really is, and it's not a overblown statement at all. And like I'm not even Christian, and I see it so full. Like, I see it so clearly. It's I think other people see it too when they watch the documentary. You just made a really good point that you're not even Christian. I'm not even the same denomination as any of these pastors. I think that's an important point to make, is that for people who are not religious, there's something in this for you, because they always come for the churches first. They come for the people who have a loyalty beyond the state, and then they get rid of those people. But then they come for you too, eventually, whatever it is that you are doing that runs afoul of the state. After all the conscientious objectors are gone, they're coming for you too. And so while this is a documentary about people of faith who stood up to the state and paid some pretty severe consequences for it, and it is framed by my Christian worldview. This is a documentary for anybody who wants to see the history of the tyranny in Canada over the last, 10 years, but specifically 3 years, that the mainstream media and the politicians want us to forget.
That's exactly how I edited it. It's not about Christian pastors who stood up. It's about people who stood up for you. Mm-hmm. And you can watch it as a Christian and be horrified by what happened to their church, or you could watch it as someone like me who could see that and be like, oh, that's really bad, but it's not the worst thing ever. But you can still see how it's like awful. And you see that these people are standing up for people who are atheists. They're standing up for Muslims. They're standing up for the Jewish. They're standing up for everybody. And that's kind of what the thing that I wanted to portray of how I edited what they're saying and how they say it. And it works.
Yeah, and one of the things that I did when I was asking questions of the pastors, and thank you for letting me do that, because this is your artistic vision, baby. But one thing I asked the pastors, I tried to ask them the same, 8 or 10 questions, because I wanted to point out that they would likely give many different answers. Ultimately, they gave a lot of the same answers. But I wanted to point out,
which was also weird. Like, it was not weird in a good way.
Yeah, it was weird in a good way. But I wanted to point out that they were all different. They were all different denominations, very different styles, all of them. Different, belief systems sometimes. But none of that mattered when it came to the state. And that was a lot of the criticisms you saw of some of the pastors. They would say, well, Pastor Art, he's too fiery, and maybe Pastor Hildebrandt, he's just a little different. He's different to look at. He talks a little different. Those people might be a little bit weird, on the outside looking in. I don't think that. I think they're the nicest people you'll ever meet. But those are the criticisms. Or, maybe, Pastor Phil Hutchins, he's just strange. It didn't matter because they were all really different, and we saw that here in Alberta with Pastor James Coates and Tim Stevens, like the nicest, calmest, kindest, bookish guys you'll ever meet. They were being locked up the same way the firebrand pastors were. And I really wanted to frame my questions to point that out. And I think it comes across in your editing, in talking to the men, different demeanors, different styles, but they gave a lot of the same answers when it came down to being obedient to God above the state. That was really the one theme that went through everything.
Man, it was interesting to go back and look at like someone like Pastor Art Pawlowski. But the way that it evolved for him was, it didn't start off with like ripping the mask up. It didn't start with just like the metaphorical middle finger to the government. It was like, no, I'm just trying to feed the homeless. That's literally all I'm trying to do. And then it just evolved into them kept pushing on that. And then you go over to Pastor Tobias, who kept his church home for, I think it was like a month. And then like they were just like, what, like, and then they obviously didn't see the people dropping dead or whatever from COVID. So they're like, okay, let's like go back into church slowly. Like, we need to gather. People aren't gathering enough. We need to come together, and this is the time that we need to be together. And then his dad passed away. So they had a funeral for his father. And that was when the RCMP first showed up. And like, you can kind of see how that would, I don't want to say radicalize somebody, but like, radicalize somebody into a good way, like to a good frame of mind to actually stand up to something that is wrong. And you can see that none of them did anything terrible. All they did was exactly what their faith calls them to do, which is just church.
Yeah. I mean, to use some biblical framing, the scales fell away from his eyes when the RCMP showed up at his dad's funeral outdoors. And
I would lose my mind.
I would too. Would too. There were points at which during my mother's funeral, I thought I could just do something right now and the RCMP could come. I had those intrusive thoughts. But you see this also with Pastor Tracy and Rodney, where they did their best to follow the rules until such time as the rules made absolutely no sense. And they did their best to go along with the government, while still keeping up those guardrails. Like, yes, you can definitely come and inspect our church, just not while Pastor Rodney is on the pulpit and people are praying. And you can't run around like maniacs in the room where the little children are. They were doing their best to comply with the government. The government was not doing the best that the government could do to respect their religious freedoms.
I can share something on that actually too. I was in back and forth with Tracy about just sending me videos of what was happening like at the time, just so I can put it over top of when you guys are talking and cut up the clips and stuff like that. And I had this really long, like, I don't know, it was like an 8-minute weirdly chopped up clip. And it was like from a cell phone, like vertical. And I was like, oh, Tracy, come on. So I was like going through it. And then I realized that it wasn't Tracy's cell phone footage. And I was like, who shot this? And I was like, it's not a congregant. It's not like a protester. This is the health inspector's phone footage.
Yeah. One,
in my head, I was like, how the hell do I have that? But two, like, how the heck did she have that? Two, I was watching through it, and it is literally the footage from the health inspector knocking on the church. Like, you can see the phone in the hand, and then you see Tracy come out, and she's like holding it up as if it's like some, I mean, I guess recording does protect you, so I can see why she did that. And then Tracy's like, no, you can't come in right now. Like, she was the health inspector was like 40 minutes early. When they start at 9, she came at 8:20. And then Tracy's like, no, we actually do start at 8. Like, when people start to show up is when we start, talking and praying and stuff like that. And so the health inspector's like, okay, next week I'll come at 7 a.m. And Tracy just laughs. And she's like, you don't know. You don't have to come. And then she's like, well, I'll just stand in the back and I'll just take my pictures and I'll do my things. And she's like, no, you won't. Like, you're not going to do that. And then the health inspector's like, so someone showed up late in the video. They're walking in without a mask. And she like calls that out. She's like, aren't they interrupting your service because they're showing up late? And Tracy's like, no, they're part of the church. They can come in whatever time they want. And then the health inspector, like, she kind of gets all like sassy or whatever. And she's like, well, this doesn't happen at my church. My church wouldn't have a problem with this. And then walks away. And then the video ends. I was like, it was literally, as a filmmaker and as an editor, it is gold footage. Like, it's likely my favorite part of the documentary. And it's just such a small part of having that footage from the health inspector. I don't know. It's just so cool.
Yeah, the health inspector, I was in court and she testified something very similar. She said, well, my church complied. Great. That's why you're that denomination. And that's why Tracy is her denomination. That's the beauty of Christianity. If this one doesn't fit you, you can go to the next one. And we don't all have to believe the same as the health inspector, who fancies herself to be some sort of theologian, I suppose. And it was funny to see that sort of attitude brought into court. It was something that you saw happening online, people saying, well, why can't they just comply?
You know who I bet she's related to? I think she's related to the cop that arrested Tim Stevens outside his house, where he's like giving Bible quotes to him, render unto what is Caesar's, and Tim's like, what the heck are you talking about?
It's funny how he didn't like quote the second part of that quote. So render
and to God what is God's. Yeah,
exactly. So it's actually restraining order against Caesar. Like, that's yours. The church is not yours. But people who are unfamiliar with the Bible will use it to their own devices, as we saw over and over and over again during COVID. But the reason I wanted to have you on the show, now that we've had our little chitty chat, is that the documentary is completely finished. It's gorgeous. I think it's one of the greatest things we've ever done. I'm so proud of it. And not just because I'm very passionate on this issue, but I think it is cinematic and beautiful. And you took such care and skill in telling the stories of the pastors. And I think it is important work, because the other side of this is all of a sudden saying we want an amnesty for what we've done. Maybe you do. Maybe you want that. Maybe you might even get that. Maybe I might even be a good Christian and forget it. But you also need to live with what you've done. You need to see what you've done to these people before I can forgive you for it. And I think that is why this documentary is so important. But it's completely done, and we're taking it on a tour. which is something we've never done before. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I just want to back up to that point that you made about like they have to live with this. It's part of the historical record now. And I did two things with the documentary to kind of physicalize that. I'm running out of words here. One of them, I took out everything that is timely. So anything that someone who is kept up with this, kept up with the phenomena of the whole thing that happened, I cut out a lot of the stuff that is kind of like insights, like only that those people would know, so that now when my kid watches this, like he will be able to understand everything that happened. Like there's nothing that you don't need to Google anything after. It's very to the point, and the story is like it's full. And secondly, the way that I colored it, which I'd love to tell everybody now, is that I did it by accident when I made this beautiful cinematic, like perfect shadow, perfect dark, perfect color. Everything was good. And then my fingers slipped and I put this like weird glow onto it, which I've never used before. And then the light, like the software took the light in Pastor Arthur's room and like put light rays on them. I was like, whoa, that's like, it just felt like I added some like God to it. Yeah. And then it also put this like halation around him where it felt like it was a dream. But because I already had it all dark, it felt like a bad dream. It was like a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And I just started applying that to you. I applied that to Henry Hildebrandt, and I just looked at it and I was like, the whole documentary now, like it kind of looks like a dream. Yeah. And that's kind of what I want. Effect. Yeah. In 10 years, 5 years, when someone watches this, like they'll be able to look at it and just feel that how COVID was a bad dream, because no matter where you stood on the issue, it was a bad dream for everybody. Yeah. And it will be. So yeah. And we're taking on tour. Sorry to backtrack there. We are going to Calgary twice, Toronto, Ottawa, Regina, Steinbach, Manitoba, St. John, Edmonton, yeah. And BC in August. Yes. But we haven't booked that one yet, but we can share that.
Yes. So BC also in August. It's a grueling travel schedule, as it tends to be for you and I, but we want to make sure that we bring the documentary as close to the congregations who participated in the documentary, because their communities were affected by this, and we want to make sure that we're really honoring their contributions, not just to our documentary, but to the liberty and freedom of all Canadians. So that's why we're doing it, and we've got somebody very interested in helping us show it in BC. But we've also had some trouble finding venues because of the subject matter. And so I find this fascinating, because these are places that will show like gore, depravity, hedonism. You just can't show what the government did to churches.
Yeah, they show the movies about that like not glorify, but that talk about slavery, and it's just like N-words dropping here and there in a Cineplex, and I'm like, I know you don't call the director and say like, you can't say that in a movie, which like, if the movie's about that, like whatever, say it, but like, don't come to us and say, you can't show that here because of its content. Like it just doesn't make any sense. But I will say that, and I'll totally call them out, I have no problem doing it, Cineplex and Landmark Cinemas both agreed to take on our documentary, Cineplex BC and Landmark in all of Ontario. And I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. Like I'll take that. And then they both sent an email and they both said, we'll give you the 10 a.m. show. I'm like, who goes to the movie at 10? Not even a child who's staying home from sick goes to see Super Mario Bros. At 10 a.m. Nobody goes to a movie then. And that was their kind of way of saying like, yeah, we'll respect free speech, but we'll limit you to the absolute max. Yeah. So I'll frame those emails, but I won't be showing our movie there. Just wow. That's like, when the old Twitter, like when they would let you publish things on Twitter, but no one could find you. Completely shadow banned. Like, well, look, you have free speech, I guess, but I'm yelling into a void. It's this sort of same thing. And we should tell everybody, you can
get tickets and showtime details and see the incredible trailer at savethechristians.com. It's all available there. And there's also, we have some licensing opportunities that we're considering there also. So if you miss our in-person showings, there are other ways that you could see it, bring it to your own congregation or your own, civil liberties group, whatever. We're working on that. We're tweaking the fine details, but we want to make sure that this gets in front of as many eyeballs as possible because, as you say, it's part of the historical record.
Yeah. You just wrapped it all up right there.
And okay, go ahead. I'll shut up.
No, it's all you.
I was just going to say, and we should let everybody know that this is not our last documentary. It might be our best one to date, I think, but it's not our last documentary. We've already started work on the next one. I think we're not quite ready yet to tell everybody what it is, but I just want to let everybody know that we're already working hard behind the scenes again on that grueling travel schedule.
And that's why it's a grueling traveling schedule, because we got to wrap up this documentary in all of July so we can work on the next one all of August.
Yeah, so the next one starts all of August. So we'll be traveling around, working on the next documentary, and hopefully, so we'll launch that one in the fall. So everybody at home, stay tuned. We'll have details. And I think we're going to do it much the same way, where we'll give out perks for people who want to pitch in, so that people can get sort of invested in the work that we are doing, because it really is telling the stories of all Canadians.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a mistake, but one thing I think I learned from this was I like the fact that we're kind of starting this before we announce it, just so when people do or do get interested in the perks, that they can actually see something. They can see something that we've done, so that it's not just our word against which I mean, we're going to do it, but I think it'd be cool to have something be like, this is what we're doing, but we also want to keep doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not just selling a dream. We're already
exactly. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
That's why I'm the narrator of the documentary. I'm the wordsmith. You're the visual guy. Kian, I know that you've got work to do today, and so do I, but I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and for working so hard on this documentary. I think it's your best work to date.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's our best work to date.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show. I'll talk to you later today. I mean, we work together.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I'll talk to you in an hour.
Yeah, okay. Bye, Kian.
Bye.
This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
my mug. I know. It's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
Well, we've come to the portion of the show, as always, where we invite your viewer feedback, because without you, there is no Rebel News. So we want to hear from you. Unlike the mainstream media, we don't leave our comment section closed up like Fort Knox. We want to have a lively, civilized debate in the comment section, or, we want to hear if you like what we're doing or if you hate it. It's one of the reasons why I give out my email address right now. It's sheila@rebelnews.com. Let me know what you think. Put Gun Show letters in the subject line so that it's easier for me to find. I do get sometimes upwards of 100 or hundreds of emails per day. So that just helps me sort through them. But also don't hesitate to leave a comment on, whatever platform you're watching the free version of the show, on YouTube or Rumble. Sometimes I go looking over there. Tonight's letter comes to us from a lady named Joanne, and it's on last week's show that I did with my friend, David Menzies. And we were talking about the war on parents that seems to be happening down at school board meetings. Now, this is a phenomenon that's happening, I think, across the civilized Western world, but it really is focused in Ontario, in Ottawa, in Toronto, Halton, where there are these attempts to shut parents out of any conversation around what should be taught to their children in school. It seems to be focused around transgender issues and gender theory, but I think that's just the flashpoint. I think there has been for quite some time this pervasive problem with teachers and people in the education system thinking that they're co-parents, and that even though they are employees of the state, paid for by the taxpayer, ultimately the parent, they think that they should have some rights to infect your children with their ideology, and you don't get to say in it. And that's outrageous. It's happened long before now. I think this is just the breaking point for a lot of people. Joanne writes, Sheila, I'm a teacher in small town Alberta watching the gun show from a couple of days ago with the legendary David Menzies, thinking that you are completely right, except I'm waiting for you to mention the approved sex education curriculum that Alberta teachers are required to teach. I've linked it below, but anyone can just Google Alberta sex education and you'll get the official site. My principal sent it to all teachers with the lesson plans and resources and the inclusive language we are required to use in the classroom, like pregnant person, assigned at birth, etc. Please look at the teacher and parent portals. It's not just Ontario that has a problem with this. Oh, I completely agree with you, but I'll preface that at the end of this. And it's not just incompetent woke school board members who are pushing it. Gender ideology indoctrination is here in Alberta, created and sanctioned by Alberta Health and idiot teachers that are giddily lapping it up. I also appreciate you immensely. Thank you for the work that you do, Joanne. And then she linked it there, and I'll actually link that in the show notes. You know what, Joanne, first of all, I want to thank you because you are a good teacher grinding away in the mechanisms of the machine. And the machine is evil and it wants to infect kids with a mind poison. And I'm so glad that you are in the system, as probably difficult as it is for you, because we need people like you protecting children like mine inside the system and resisting it in any way possible while still maintaining your employment. You still have kids to feed too and bills to pay. So let me just say that while you appreciate me, I very much appreciate you. You are an absolute essential part of this. And it's got to be very difficult for you to be inside all of that, just seeing the madness swirling around you. Now, I have read the Alberta sex ed curriculum. It's kooky. It's not great. And it's written by activists very clearly. It uses weird language that erases women, which the feminists seem to be okay about. But I should point out to you, now I don't know if this is the same in your school system, and it might not be. And thanks to the prickly parents and the very orthodox Catholics in my school system. But while the sex ed curriculum is taught in our schools, we were given the opportunity to opt out entirely. And we were also given the assurances that whatever the province wanted our teachers to teach, it would be taught through a very specific Catholic lens with a focus on abstinence and respecting your body because it is a temple of the Holy Spirit, created in the image of the divine. And that it would maintain Catholic teaching as the teachers instructed the sex ed curriculum with a strong focus on biology and Catholic doctrine. So I was given that in my school system. I don't know if that's like that in other school systems, and kudos to the teachers inside our school system who advocated for making sure that sex ed was taught through the Catholic lens that we hope it will be, because that's why we send our kids to Catholic school. And strong thanks to the parents who ensured that that was the case. But without those two, groups coming together for the kids, I don't think that would have been the case in my school system. So I think the moral of the story there is good teachers join hands with good parents to protect the kids from the activists. And it can be done. So I don't want to say which school system my kids go to, but I was very glad that that was the case. And I've run up against some activist teachers in that school system. I know they're there too, but they seem to be losing because other people are rising up. So I'm really happy about that. And I think that's it. I even read the email. Actually, I think I read it on the live stream that I received from my daughter's school assuring me that everything would be taught through a Catholic lens. So it can be done. It can be. I guess the moral of the story is it can be done. It's just not often done. And it's time for parents to get involved. And if there are brave teachers inside the system grinding it out, thank you. I appreciate you so much. I know it's a terrible job that you have to do. Well, everybody, that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see everybody back here in the same time, in the same space next week. And as always, remember, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.